1,000,000 years ago, the land stretched endlessly beneath a pale, silvery sky, untouched by human hands. The air was sharp and carried the smell of damp earth, wild flowers, and the faint musk of creatures that roamed beyond sight. Towering trees rose like ancient sentinels, their trunks wrapped in thick vines, their canopies blocking much of the sun. Between the trees, the ground was a tangle of roots and ferns, scattered with bones from hunts long past. In the distance, jagged cliffs stood like the teeth of some great beast, their shadows swallowing the valleys below. This was not a gentle world. Every sound, every flicker of movement could mean life or death. In a small clearing carved out by countless generations of careful choice, a band of early humans huddled around a low, flickering fire. They were not yet like the humans we know today. Their foreheads were heavy, their arms long and powerful, their skin marked with the dust of the earth. The fire they guarded was more than warmth. It was the fragile heart of their survival. Its light pushed back the darkness, and its crackle was a sound of hope. The group numbered fewer than 20, men, women, and children, bound together by the unspoken knowledge that they were stronger as one. The children sat close to their mothers, swaddled in rough hides made from the skins of deer and wild goats. Some of the older children clung to their fathers, staring wide-eyed into the black forest beyond the light's reach. A man with deep-set eyes and scarred arms sat near the edge of the firelight, holding a sharpened spear tipped with a carefully chipped stone. He had seen many seasons come and go, and his gaze shifted constantly, from the trees to the tall grass to the shadows between rocks. Another man crouched nearby, feeding the fire with dry branches, his fingers moving quickly, as if afraid the flame might vanish at any moment. They had chosen this spot for a reason. A fallen tree formed a natural barrier on one side, while a shallow stream curved along the other, giving them some protection from the creatures that hunted by smell or sight. Still, nothing was certain. The roar of a predator could rise without warning, and the air itself sometimes carried the trembling silence that came before danger. A soft whimper came from one of the youngest children, barely able to walk, her tiny hands clutching the fur wrapped around her. Her mother hushed her gently, pressing the child's head to her chest, rocking slightly as she kept her eyes fixed on the darkness. The men shifted at the sound, their bodies tensing, because noise could call attention they did not want. Somewhere far off, a low rumble echoed, so faint it could have been thunder or the growl of something enormous moving through the underbrush. The group reacted instantly. The hunters tightened their grip on their spears, the fire tender piled on more wood, and the mothers drew their children closer. No words were exchanged. Language was still young and clumsy, but their movements were precise, born of countless encounters with danger. They knew the night was long, and the world beyond their fire was filled with teeth and hunger. Yet here they remained, holding their place against the darkness, because the little ones sleeping in their arms were worth every risk. The fire crackled, the cold wind whispered through the trees, and the first humans stood guard, determined, watchful, unbroken. By the time the pale light of dawn began to seep into the forest, the small tribe stirred from their uneasy rest. The fire had burned low, its embers glowing like scattered rubies beneath the ash, and the cold crept in again. Frost clung to the leaves, and the grass crackled softly underfoot. The world was quieter in the morning, but not safer. Morning was when many predators hunted, their stomachs empty after the long night. The hunters moved first. One of the older men, his hair matted with streaks of gray, rose silently, stretching his shoulders and checking the sharp edge of his spearhead. Another, younger and lean, knelt to study the ground near the camp's edge. The damp soil told stories, faint paw prints pressed into the earth, too large for any deer, too deep to belong to a wolf. The two men exchanged a brief look, their eyes saying what their tongues could not. Something had passed by in the night, circling, testing. Near the center of the clearing, the mothers began to gather the children. The youngest were swaddled tighter in hides, while the older ones were told to stay close and silent. A woman with long, tangled hair pulled a strip of dried meat from a pouch and fed it to her son, watching as his small fingers clumsily tore at it. Even the act of eating was done quickly, without lingering. They could not risk staying in one place too long. The tribe had learned, through generations of trial and loss, that survival meant movement. They never remained in a single spot for more than a handful of days, especially if signs of predators appeared. The men had chosen their next location already, a cluster of high rocks near a narrow river, where the sound of rushing water would mask their presence, and the height would give them a vantage point to see threats coming. Before they set out, the oldest woman in the group approached the fire's remains. Her back was bent with age, but her hands were steady as she took a burning branch and wrapped its end in thick, dry moss. The flames caught quickly, and she shielded them with a flat stone as they prepared to move. Fire was life, and losing it meant starting over. A task that could take hours, even days, in the wrong conditions. The march began slowly. The hunters took the lead, spears in hand, scanning the forest ahead. Behind them, the women moved in a tight cluster with the children in the middle, each adult keeping a hand on a little one to ensure none wandered. The air was alive with the calls of distant birds, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the constant crunch of feet over frozen leaves. Every sound was analyzed. Every shadow was noted. The men paused often to listen, crouching low, sometimes signaling for silence when a noise caught their attention. The children, sensing the seriousness, stayed unusually quiet, their wide eyes darting between the adults and the forest. Hours later, as the sun began to climb higher, a faint growl drifted from somewhere to their left. It was low, deliberate, a warning or a claim. The hunters immediately shifted position, forming a barrier between the sound and the women, their spears raised. The group halted, and the old woman tightened her grip on the burning torch. The air grew tense, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. They did not see the creature, but they knew it was close. The tribe waited, silent, until the growl faded into the distance. Only then did they move again, more quickly now, their protective formation holding tight. Survival was not just about strength, it was about constant awareness and the willingness to act before danger struck. And in this world, hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. By the time the sun had begun to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, the tribe finally reached the cluster of high rocks they had been moving toward all day. The journey had drained them. The children's small legs trembled, and even the strongest hunters bore the fatigue in their shoulders. But as they looked upon the towering stones, streaked with lichen and glowing gold in the evening light, a sense of relief swept over them. The rocks offered more than height. Narrow crevices between them created natural walls, and there were ledges high enough for lookouts. From here, the hunters could see far into the forest, spotting predators before they drew near. The women immediately began guiding the children into the central hollow, where the stones formed a sort of bowl, its only entrance a tight gap barely wide enough for two people to walk through at once. It was a natural fortress, and the tribe knew how to use it. The first task was fire. The old woman who had carried the torch all day stepped forward, lowering the precious flame into a pile of dry sticks and bark that others had gathered. The fire caught quickly, its light leaping up and casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. The warmth seeped into their cold hands, and the familiar smell of smoke settled over the camp like a protective cloak. The hunters, however, did not relax. Two of them climbed the rocks, carrying their spears, scanning the tree line for movement. Another began laying sharpened sticks across the narrow entrance, creating a barrier that could slow down anything trying to enter. They had learned long ago that predators, whether beasts or rival humans, often tested their defenses at night. As the sun dipped lower, the women began to prepare food. Meat strips, smoked from previous hunts, were passed around. A few roots and berries gathered along the journey were shared among the children. The smallest ones were fed first, their eyes drooping with exhaustion. Mothers pulled them close, wrapping them in hides, whispering soft hums to soothe them to sleep. Night fell quickly. The forest beyond the rocks became a dark mass, filled with the distant cries of hunting cats and the eerie howls of wolves. Every sound seemed magnified in the stillness. The fire crackled steadily, its light pushing back the darkness just enough to feel a fragile sense of safety. The lookouts remained alert, their silhouettes outlined against the moonlight. Every so often, they would shift position, listening to the forest breathe. Once, a branch snapped somewhere in the distance, and every hand instinctively went to a weapon. The sound faded, but the tension lingered. In the deepest part of the night, a child stirred and began to whimper, the sound cutting through the silence. Immediately, his mother placed a hand over his mouth, her eyes wide, rocking him gently to calm him. Silence was their armor. Noise could invite death. The child's sobs faded into small hiccups, and the danger passed. By the time dawn's first light touched the rocks, the tribe had endured another night. They had kept their young safe, not through brute force alone, but through caution, unity, and the quiet, unyielding determination that had carried humans through countless ages. In a world where survival was never guaranteed, this was victory enough.